Under the silver glow of the full moon, her own people branded her lost and abandoned her to die among the sagebrush and rattlesnakes. But fate had other plans. The ancient howls on the wind guided her to a new family, a pack of wolves that taught her their ways. Through their eyes, she learned the old magic that flows through the desert lands, the wisdom of the hunt and the unbreakable bonds of loyalty. As she grew stronger, she discovered powers that transcended both human and wolf understanding. Now, as a ruthless war party threatens to destroy her former clan, she must make a choice that will echo through generations. But can the girl they cast aside become the warrior who saves them all? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning mist clung to the desert floor as Nashoba watched her. Grandmother's weathered hands worked the strands of turquoise and bone. The medicine woman's necklace caught the first rays of dawn, each stone carrying stories older than the mesas themselves. At 13 summers, Nashoba knew she was different from the other children of the clan. While they played at mock battles and practiced with small bows, she found herself drawn to the whispers of the wind and the songs of distant coyotes. "Your spirit walks a different path, little one," her grandmother Flying Bird would say, the turquoise beads clicking softly as she moved. "Some say this makes you weak. I say it makes you strong, like the river that finds its own way through the canyon." But strength, Nashoba was learning, meant different things to different people. To the warriors, it meant swift arrows and sure feet in battle. To the mothers, it meant endurance through the harsh winters and the dry seasons. To Flying Bird, it meant wisdom to heal and knowledge of the old ways. Yet none of these seemed to fit Nashoba quite right, like a moccasin made for another's foot. She spent her days helping Flying Bird gather herbs, learning which plants could heal and which could harm. Her grandmother taught her to read the patterns in scattered bones, to interpret the dance of smoke from sacred fires, and to understand the messages carried on eagle feathers. But while other girls her age were learning to grind corn and tan hides, Nashoba's attention would drift to the distant howls that echoed through the canyons at dusk. "The wolves speak to you," Flying Bird observed one evening as Nashoba stood transfixed by a mournful howl. "This is neither good nor bad. It simply is. Like the moon that pulls at the tides, some forces in this world call to certain spirits. But the clan's warriors saw it differently. They whispered that her connection to the wild things was unnatural, that her tendency to wander alone in the desert would bring bad fortune. Even her name, Nashoba, meaning wolf in the old tongue, seemed to mark her as something apart. The turquoise and bone necklace became her anchor in these troubled times. Flying Bird had begun teaching her its secrets, how each bead contained memories of the ancestors, how the spaces between the bones were as important as the bones themselves, how the whole thing sang with power when worn during ceremonies. "Our people fear what they do not understand," Flying Bird told her one night as they sat beneath stars so bright they seemed to pierce the sky. "But understanding comes in many forms. Some learn through the spear, others through the drum, and some—" She touched the necklace at her throat. "Some learn through the spirit world that walks beside our own." Nashoba ran her fingers over a wolf tooth that hung among the turquoise beads. Unlike the other girls who shrank from such things, she found comfort in its sharp edges and the stories it held of wild freedom. In that moment, watching the firelight dance across her grandmother's face, she couldn't know that soon this necklace would be all she had left of her old life, a single thread connecting her to a world that was about to cast her out. Thunder rolled in the distance, though no clouds darkened the sky. Flying Bird's expression grew troubled as she clutched the necklace. "Change comes, little wolf. Like the spring floods, it cannot be stopped. We must learn to swim with its currents, or be swept away." As the stars wheeled overhead and the wolf songs echoed through the canyons, Neshoba felt something stirring in her blood, an ancient calling that would soon reshape her destiny and that of her entire clan. But for now, she simply sat with her grandmother, learning the ways of turquoise and bone, while the desert winds carried secrets only she could hear. The sacred vessel shattered against the ceremonial ground, its pieces scattering like fallen stars across the packed earth. In the silence that followed, Neshoba could hear her own heartbeat drowning out even the evening wind. The clay fragments, each one painted with prayers and power symbols, lay accusingly at her feet, their protective magic seeping into the dust. "Dark spirits," Elder Stoneface declared, his voice cutting through the horrified gasps of the gathered clan. "They guide her hands, turn her against our ways." His eyes, hard as desert flint, fixed upon the spilled sacred water that should have blessed the spring planting. Flying Bird stepped forward, her medicine necklace gleaming. The vessel was old, worn thin by time. Any hand, yes, Stoneface interrupted, but it was her hand, as it was her voice that called the wolves closer to our hunting grounds, her presence that made the spring deer flee before our hunters could strike. Each accusation fell like a stone, building a wall between Neshoba and her people. The clan's whispers grew to a storm of murmurs. They spoke of how the previous night's hunt had failed when a wolf's howl, one that seemed to answer Neshoba's evening song, had scattered the prey. They remembered the strange tracks found near the children's playing grounds and how the livestock grew restless when she passed. "She carries no evil," Flying Bird insisted, but even her wise voice wavered before the tide of fear. "She is different, yes, but difference is not darkness." Stoneface lifted the largest piece of the broken vessel, its surface showing the sacred bear spirit, now split in two. "The signs are clear. The spirits themselves reject her. Even now, she shows no remorse, no fear." He pointed to Neshoba's calm face, unmarked by tears or shame. "She stands as the wolves stand, apart from our ways, dangerous to our survival." Neshoba wanted to speak, to explain how the vessel had seemed to pulse with wrongness in her hands, how she had felt the crack forming before it appeared, as if the clay itself had chosen to break. But she knew her words would find no purchase. Here, the truth she felt in her bones, that something older than their ceremonies was working through her, would sound like madness to their ears. More clan members stepped back from her, forming a circle of isolation. Mothers pulled their children away, warriors gripped their spears tighter, and even the dogs slunk into the shadows. Only Flying Bird remained beside her, the old woman's presence like a last anchor to her world. "The council will convene," Stoneface announced, his authority unopposed in the face of such an omen. "Until the rise of the full moon, she will be kept apart. Then the spirits will guide our judgment." As two warriors led her to a small hut at the edge of the settlement, Neshoba caught a glimpse of her grandmother bending to collect the scattered pieces of the vessel. In Flying Bird's hands, even broken things held power and purpose. But some breaks, Neshoba was beginning to understand, were meant to stay broken. Through the long hours of her vigil, she heard the council's discussions drift on the wind. They spoke of signs and portents, of the balance between tradition and survival, of the dangers of harboring one who walked too closely with wild spirits. Even Flying Bird's respected voice grew faint against the rising tide of fear. When the full moon finally rose, painting the desert in silver light, the council had reached its decision. Stoneface's words fell like winter rain. "The spirits have shown us their will. She must be separated from the clan, led into the desert to walk her own path, be it with her wolf spirits or into the shadows beyond." Flying Bird's medicine necklace caught the moonlight as she made one final plea, but the old ways were clear. One who brought danger to the clan could not remain within it. As they led her out into the desert night, Neshoba felt a strange calm settle over her. The wind carried wolf song from the distant hills, and for the first time she allowed herself to answer it in her heart. Behind her, the broken pieces of the sacred vessel remained scattered in the dust, a reminder of how quickly the known world it could shatter, and how some spirits were never meant to be contained by clay and ceremony. 3 days alone in the desert had taught Neshoba how little she truly knew of survival. The skills learned at Flying Bird's side, identifying herbs, reading weather signs, finding water in barrel cactus, seemed like children's games against the harsh reality of solitude. The sun burned away her tears before they could fall, and the wind stripped her voice raw when she tried to sing the healing songs her grandmother had taught her. On the 4th morning, she found it, a wolf's track preserved in stone, so ancient the rock had grown around it like a treasure keeping its secrets. She traced the impression with trembling fingers, remembering Flying Bird's teachings about signs from the spirit world. The track pointed east, toward the deeper canyons, where the clan's hunters rarely ventured. "Show me the way," she whispered to the fossil print, her first word since the banishment. The desert wind answered with a hint of sweetness, the promise of water. Following the track's direction, she discovered a narrow wash where desert plums grew wild. Their tart flesh eased her thirst, and their stones she saved in a pouch made from the torn hem of her dress. Each small victory against death felt like a prayer answered by spirits older than her people's fears. The nights proved harder than the days. Darkness brought cold that crept into her bones, and sounds that made her heart race. The scratch of hunting claws, the silent sweep of owl wings, the distant yip of coyotes. She learned to burrow into sandy hollows, to cover herself with brush to make herself small against the vastness of the star-filled sky. But it was during one such night that everything changed. The moon hung full and heavy, just as it had on the night of her banishment, when she heard it, a howl different from the coyote's chorus. Deep, resonant, it spoke of power and belonging, of hunt joy and pack strength. Without thinking, Neshoba lifted her face to the moon and answered. The silence that followed her call seemed to hold its breath. Then, like shadows made flesh, they appeared. The wolf pack emerged from the darkness, 5 strong, their fur silvered by moonlight. The leader, a great male with a battle-scarred face, stood closest. His eyes met hers with an intelligence that stripped away all she thought she knew about the divide between human and animal wisdom. Neshoba remained still, remembering Flying Bird's words about moments when the spirit world drew close to our own. The alpha wolf took one step forward, then another. She could see the ripple of muscle beneath fur, smell the wild sage and desert dust in his coat. His presence carried the same power she had felt in her grandmother's sacred items, but raw, uncontained by human ceremony. When he was close enough that she could feel his breath, the wolf lowered his head and pressed his nose to the ground. There, beneath his paw, lay another track in the stone, a perfect match to the ancient one that had guided her. In that moment, Neshoba understood that some paths are written in rock long before we walk them. The alpha lifted his head and gave a soft woof, not quite a bark, not quite a growl. The rest of the pack relaxed, moving closer. An older female with graying muzzle approached next, her movements reminding Neshoba so strongly of flying. Bird that tears finally broke free. The she-wolf leaned against her side, offering warmth and an acceptance that asked nothing of her, except that she be exactly what she was. As the night deepened, the pack settled around her in a loose circle. Their body heat kept the desert cold at bay, and their presence filled the hollow spaces that loneliness had carved inside her. She studied their movements, the way they communicated with subtle shifts of ear and tail, the hierarchy that flowed like water between them, natural as breathing. When dawn painted the canyon walls rose gold, Neshoba rose with the pack. Her legs trembled with hunger and exhaustion, but something new strengthened her spine. The alpha paused, looking back at her with those knowing eyes. The choice was clear: follow or stay, live or die. The ancient track in stone had led her to this moment, this decision. Neshoba took her first step toward her new family, leaving behind the girl who had shattered a sacred vessel. With each stride, she felt the desert changing around her, not softer but more alive. The wolves moved with fluid grace, teaching her without words how to read the landscape in a new way. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning to live as they lived, to see as they saw, to become something that bridged two worlds. The grey she-wolf's fang hung from a twist of sinew at Neshoba's neck, replacing her grandmother's turquoise. And bone. Shadow Singer, as Neshoba had come to know the elder female wolf, had shed it during a hunt, 3 moons after accepting the human girl into their pack. It was not given, nothing in wolf society was simply given, but earned through a lesson that nearly cost Neshoba her life. She had been learning the pack's ways, studying their complex social dance. The alpha, whom she called Stoneheart for his steadfast nature, led with quiet authority. Shadow Singer, his mate, taught through example and occasional correction, while the younger wolves, Swiftwater, Night Runner, and Thunderpaw, alternated between testing her limits and showing her their hunting techniques. That day, they had been tracking a herd of pronghorn antelope. Neshoba, eager to prove herself, had rushed forward too soon. Her mistake scattered the herd and left the pack hungry. Shadow Singer's disciplinary nip had drawn blood, but it was the disappointment in the old wolf's eyes that cut deeper. "I understand now," Neshoba had whispered that night, nursing her wounded pride more than her shoulder. "The hunt is not about speed alone." The wolves had transformed her understanding of patience. Where her clan measured time by suns and moons, the pack lived in the eternal present, each moment perfect and complete in itself. They taught her to read the wind not just with her nose, but with her whole being, to feel the earth's vibrations. Through her feet, to listen with ancient instincts humans had forgotten they possessed. Shadow Singer became her primary teacher. The old wolf had a wisdom that reminded Neshoba of Flying Bird, though it was expressed through subtle ear twitches and tail positions rather than words and ceremonies. She learned that a lowered head could mean submission or hunting focus, that a raised hackle could signal fear or excitement, that the pack's hierarchy was both rigid and fluid, like water flowing over stone. The lesson that earned her the fang came during a winter hunt. The pack had been following deer tracks for 2 days, all of them hungry as the cold drove game into hiding. When they finally cornered their prey, a young buck, in a narrow canyon, Neshoba had held back, remembering her previous mistake. Shadow Singer had paused in the chase to look back at her, and in that moment, Neshoba understood. The pack, hunted as one body, one spirit, holding back was as dangerous as rushing ahead. Success required perfect unity, each member moving in concert with the others. She joined the hunt then, not as a human trying to be a wolf, but as something new, a bridge between worlds. Her 2-legged speed along the canyon rim complemented the wolves' pursuit below. When the buck turned to escape up the slope, she was there to turn it back towards Stoneheart's waiting jaws. That night, as they fed on the successful kill, Shadow Singer had approached her. The old wolf's fang was loose, and as she shook her head over the carcass, it fell into the snow. Neshoba understood. This was not a gift, but a symbol of transformation, earned through blood, hunger, and understanding. The pack's teaching went beyond hunting. They showed her how to den in winter storms, using their bodies for warmth in ways her people would never have imagined. She learned their complex language of gestures and vocalizations, discovering that wolves rarely howled simply to make noise. Each call had purpose, carrying messages about territory, location, warning, or celebration. Most importantly, they taught her about pack loyalty. Unlike her clan's rigid traditions, wolf loyalty was both simpler and more profound. It asked for everything but demanded nothing. It was proven fresh each day through action rather than ceremony. When Thunderpaw was injured by a cornered javelina, the entire pack hunted for him, until he healed. When swift water found a new water source, she immediately shared the discovery with joyful yips and bouncing playbows. Nashoba touched the fang at her throat, feeling the wisdom it contained. Shadow Singer had given her more than a token. She had given her a new way of seeing. The old wolf's teachings echoed Flying Bird's words about spirit paths, but now Nashoba understood them through experience rather than tradition. The desert itself seemed different through wolf-taught eyes. What had once been a harsh exile had become a realm of endless discovery. Every dawn brought new scents on the wind, new tracks to read, new lessons in the ancient way of the pack. She was no longer the lost girl cast out by her people. She was becoming something her clan had no words to describe. The storm drove them deep into the canyon's heart, past weathered walls where ancient hands had left their stories. As lightning split the sky, Nashoba found herself facing images that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Wolves running alongside human figures, their forms blending and separating in ways that spoke of transformation and ancient powers. The pack settled into the cave's shelter, shaking rain from their coats, while Thunderpaw kept watch at the entrance. Shadow Singer pressed close to Nashoba's side, her grey muzzle pointing toward the cave art, as if she too could read the stories. Written there, "You knew of this place," Nashoba whispered to the old wolf, recognizing now that their path through the storm had been purposeful rather than random. Shadow Singer's only response was to settle more firmly against her, eyes reflecting the occasional flash of lightning. The paintings spoke of things Flying Bird had only hinted at in her teachings, of times when the barrier between human and wolf spirit was thinner, when those who could walk between worlds were not feared but honored. One figure in particular drew Nashoba's attention. A woman running with wolves, her form caught between human and animal, surrounded by swirls of power marked in red ochre. As night deepened and the storm raged on, the cave seemed to fill with more than just the pack's presence. The painted wolves began to move in the flickering shadows cast by lightning, their spirit forms dancing across the stone. Nashoba felt Shadow Singer's steady heartbeat against her leg, anchoring her as the boundary between past and present, flesh and spirit, began to blur. She dreamed that night, but it was unlike any dream she had known before. The painted figures stepped down from the wall, their ochre forms taking on depth and life. They moved around her in a great spiral dance, led by the woman who was wolf. As they circled, they sang in voices that were both human and wolf song, teaching her secrets that her bones remembered even if her mind had forgotten. "We have waited," they seemed to say, their words more feeling than sound. "Since the first wolf shared fire with the first human, we have waited for those who could bridge the gap again." The woman who was wolf approached Nashoba, her form shifting with each step, now human, now wolf, now something in between. She reached out with hands that became paws, touching Nashoba's forehead. Knowledge flowed between them like water. How to call the wind, how to speak to the spirits of prey animals, how to blend strength and mercy in the way of the true hunter. "Your clan's fear comes from forgetting," the figure told her. "They fear what they once were, what they could be again. But you remember, in your blood runs the old magic, the first magic, born when humans and wolves first chose to hunt together." The dream teaching continued through the night. The spirit wolves showed her how to move between forms in her mind, how to see through eyes that could pierce darkness, how to hear the songs that the moon sang to the earth. Shadow Singer's presence remained constant, the old wolf's wisdom somehow, part of this ancient knowledge. When dawn finally broke and the storm passed, Nashoba awoke to find herself curled among the wolves, her body human, but her senses transformed. She could smell the story of the storm in the wet earth, hear the distant movement of deer 3 canyons away, feel the pulse of life in every desert creature as if it were her own heartbeat. Stoneheart stood at the cave's entrance, his powerful form silhouetted against the morning light. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw recognition of what had happened. She was now truly part of both worlds, wolf and human spirit merged in one form. The cave paintings remained, their colors vivid in the fresh light, but they no longer seemed like static images. They had become a window into a truth Neshoba now carried within herself. She understood that her exile had not been a punishment, but a return, a coming home to something older than clan laws or human fears. Shadowsinger nudged her gently, and Neshoba rose to follow the pack out into the dawn. The old wolf's fang at her throat seemed to hum with power, connecting her to both the physical and spirit worlds. She paused at the cave's threshold, touching the painted figures one last time, thanking them for their teachings. The desert before them was washed clean by the storm, and in the distance they could hear the calls of prey animals returning to their grazing grounds. It was time to hunt, to test her new understanding, to live in both worlds at once. As the pack moved out under the brightening sky, Neshoba felt the ancient spirits running beside them, their power flowing through her with each stride. The obsidian blade caught the morning light as Neshoba worked its edge against a piece of sandstone. 6 moons had passed since the night of spirit teaching in the painted cave, and she had learned to blend human craft with wolf wisdom. The knife she shaped was unlike anything her clan had made. Its handle wrapped in wolf fur, its blade curved like a fang, its surface etched with symbols that bridged both worlds. Stoneheart watched her work from his perch on a sun-warmed boulder, his presence both protective and evaluating. Since her spirit awakening, the Alpha had pushed her harder, sensing her growing abilities. The pack now moved with her, as if she were a wolf in human skin, anticipating her movements, responding to her silent signals. "The prey approaches," she whispered, both to the knife and to Stoneheart. Her enhanced senses caught the scent of bighorn sheep moving along the ridge above them. The Alpha's ears twitched forward. He had caught it too. Without need for signals, the rest of the pack emerged from their resting places, ready for the hunt. This would be no ordinary pursuit. Neshoba had learned to combine the pack's hunting strategies with skills no wolf could possess. The obsidian knife was part of this new way, not just a tool, but a focus for the power that flowed between human and wolf spirits. Shadowsinger took up her position beside Neshoba, the old wolf's movements now perfectly synchronized with her human companion. Together, they had developed hunting techniques that honored both their natures. While the pack would drive the prey, Neshoba could climb, use terrain in ways 4-legged hunters could not, and strike with precision that even wolf fangs couldn't match. The hunt began with practiced silence. Swiftwater and Thunderpaw circled wide to cut off the sheep's escape route, while Nightrunner waited in the shadows of a narrow canyon. Stoneheart would make the first push, driving the herd toward the trap, but it was Shadowsinger and Neshoba who would make the crucial move. As she moved into position, Neshoba felt the familiar merge of consciousness, her human mind expanding to encompass wolf instincts. The obsidian knife hummed against her hip, eager for the chase. She could sense each pack member's position, as clearly as if they were extensions of her own body. The first bleats of alarm told her Stoneheart had begun. The thunder of hooves on stone echoed through the canyon as the bighorn sheep fled the Alpha's charge. Neshoba moved like flowing water across the rocky terrain, her feet finding purchase where even mountain goats might slip. The spirit teachings had given her this too, the ability to read stone as easily as wolves read scent. The herd appeared below her, exactly where the pack had driven them. In that moment, she was everything at once. The wolf's hunting instinct, the human's tool-making wisdom, and something older than both. The obsidian knife seemed to leap into her hand of its own accord. Her leap from the cliff would have seemed impossible to human eyes. Too far, too dangerous. But she moved with the certainty of one who could feel the air currents, who knew exactly how to turn her body in flight. The knife flashed once in the sunlight as she struck. It was a clean kill, honoring both the prey's spirit and the pack's need. As the other sheep scattered to safety, the pack emerged to share in the success. Stoneheart approached first, acknowledging her contribution with a respectful touch of his nose to her hand. Shadowsinger's proud stance spoke volumes about how far her student had come. Later, as they fed, Nashoba used the obsidian knife to share the meat equally, another blending of human and wolf ways. The pack had learned to wait for her cuts, understanding that her tool use served the entire family. She had learned to eat as they did, honoring the prey by using all it offered. The knife had become more than a hunting tool. Like the elder wolf's fang at her throat, it was a symbol of her transformation. In its black surface, she sometimes caught glimpses of the spirit wolves running, approving of how she had taken their teachings and made them her own. That evening, as the pack rested after their successful hunt, Nashoba worked the knife's edge. Again, feeling the ancient power in the volcanic glass. Each hunt taught her more about walking between worlds, about being neither fully human nor fully wolf, but something the old spirits had always known could exist. The obsidian blade sang softly under her hands, promising there was still more. To learn, more ways to blend the strengths of both her natures. The rawhide shield lay half buried in sand, its surface marked with unfamiliar symbols painted in blood-red ochre. Nashoba crouched beside it, while Stoneheart and Shadowsinger circled the area, reading the story written in trampled grass and scattered campfire ash. The shield's presence here, so close to her former clan's hunting grounds, carried the scent of coming violence. Nightrunner appeared silently from the shadows of a nearby wash, his message clear in the set of his ears and the tension in his stance. He had found more signs. The pack had been tracking these strangers for 3 days, ever since Thunderpaw had caught the scent of unfamiliar horses and wood smoke on the wind. Nashoba lifted the shield, her enhanced senses picking up layers of information. The leather was cured in a different way than her people's methods, speaking of northern tribes. The painted symbols showed counting marks. She could smell the fresh ochre, tallying what she recognized as kills. Her stomach tightened as she counted them. 23 marks, 23 lives. "War party," she whispered to Shadowsinger, who pressed against her leg in acknowledgement. The old wolf had been especially alert since they'd first detected the intruders, as if she too understood the gravity of what they were tracking. Stoneheart's hackles rose slightly at the words, his keen senses already oriented toward the path the strangers had taken. Through her wolf-enhanced vision, Nashoba could read more in the tracks than any human tracker might find. The war party numbered 15 warriors, their horses heavily laden with weapons. They moved with the confidence of hunters who expected no resistance, following the seasonal paths that would lead them straight to her former clan's summer camping grounds. The memories she had pushed aside for so many moons now rushed back. The faces of children who had once shunned her, the elders who had feared her gift, even Stoneface who had pronounced her exile. Despite everything, they were still her people. The wolf pack was her family now, but some bonds, she realized, could not be broken even by banishment. Shadowsinger nudged the shield with her nose, then looked up at Nashoba with eyes that held ancient wisdom. The old wolf had taught her that pack loyalty meant protecting not just those who ran with you, but also the territories and connections that made you who you were. Stoneheart stood at attention, waiting for her decision. The Alpha had learned to trust her judgment in matters that bridged the human and wolf worlds. A hawk's cry drew her attention skyward, and in that moment she felt the spirit wolf's presence strongly. The painted cave's teachings stirred in her blood. The power she had been given was meant for more than just survival. The woman who was wolf, in the ancient art, had been a protector, a guardian of both worlds. The shield's surface reflected the setting sun as Nashoba turned it in her hands. She could track the war party easily now. Her wolf senses could follow their trail, even if they tried to hide it. But the real question was what to do with this knowledge. The clan had cast her out, branded her as touched by dark spirits. Did she owe them anything? Swiftwater returned from his scouting run, his mental images flowing clearly into her consciousness. The war party had split into two groups, planning to attack from different directions. Their confidence made them careless. They had no idea that their movements were being watched by something far more dangerous than ordinary wolves or human scouts. Stoneheart's low growl carried a question. The pack would follow her lead, but the decision had to be hers. These were human matters, touching the complex web of relationships that wolves understood but approached differently. Pack loyalty was simpler, clearer. You protected your own, even at great cost. Neshoba stood, lifting the shield. Its weight reminded her of the burden of choice, of the responsibility that came with walking between worlds. The sun was setting behind the mesas, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of Flying Bird's turquoise necklace. Somewhere ahead, her former clan prepared for a season of hunting, unaware of the danger approaching from the north. The wolves gathered around her, their unity a tangible force. In their eyes, she saw not just loyalty but understanding. They had taught her that true strength came not from holding grudges, but from knowing when to bare one's fangs in defense of others, even those who had caused pain. The enemy's shield would guide them forward, its presence a reminder of the violence they moved to prevent. The small moccasins lay half-buried near the base of an ancient juniper tree, exactly where she had hidden them on the night of her banishment. Neshoba lifted them gently, her enhanced senses reading the story of her past life in the worn leather. Her child feet had walked these paths once, learning the ways of her people before the wolf spirits called her to a different destiny. Stoneheart kept watch from a nearby ridge, while Shadowsinger stayed close, understanding the weight of this moment. The pack had traveled through the night, following paths that would keep them hidden from both the war party and clan scouts. Now, with dawn approaching, they had reached the outer edges of her people's territory. "Everything is smaller than I remember," Neshoba whispered to Shadowsinger, cradling the moccasins. The hunting trails, the sacred peaks, even the great mesa that had once seemed to touch the sky, all appeared different through her transformed eyes. Or perhaps it was she who had grown larger, expanded beyond the boundaries of her former life. The old wolf pressed against her leg, offering comfort in the pack's way. In the distance, thin streams of cookfire smoke rose from the summer camp, her people preparing for another day, unaware of the danger approaching from the north. The scents carried on the wind told her many stories, children playing near, the stream, women preparing morning meals, hunters readying their weapons for the day's hunt. Through her wolf-enhanced senses, she could detect changes in the clan's patterns. They had grown more numerous since her departure, with new babies' cries mixing with familiar voices. The livestock pens had been moved, the defensive positions subtly altered. Life had continued in her absence, the clan adapting and growing like a river changing its course. Thunderpaw and Swiftwater returned from their scouting run, their mental images clear in her mind. The war party's two groups were moving into position, still 2 days' ride from the clan's location. Their approach was methodical, professional. These were experienced raiders who had destroyed other camps before. The enemy's shield she had found was not their first trophy, nor would it be their last if they succeeded here. Neshoba slipped the child's moccasins into her deerskin pouch next to the obsidian knife. The contrast between these artifacts of her past and present lives sparked something in her understanding. She had been thinking of her transformation as a complete break from her human past, but perhaps it was more like the growth rings in a tree, each layer building upon the last rather than replacing it. Shadowsinger's ears perked suddenly, catching a sound too faint for even Neshoba's enhanced hearing. Stoneheart signaled from his position. Someone was approaching. The pack melted into the shadows of the juniper grove, their movements silent. As morning mist, Neshoba followed their example, her body remembering the hunting lessons that had taught her to become invisible even in plain sight. A small group of clan children passed nearby, gathering early piñon nuts. Among them, she recognized faces that had once belonged to her tormentors, now grown taller, their features beginning to shape themselves into adulthood. They laughed and chattered, innocent of the war party's approach, innocent too of how close they stood to something their people had cast out as dangerous. One child, a girl about the age Neshoba had been at her banishment, paused near the juniper tree. For a moment, it seemed she sensed something watching. Her hand reached out, almost touching the branch behind which Neshoba hid. Then, another child called, and the moment passed. The gathering party moved on, leaving only their footprints in the morning dew. Stoneheart approached once the children were gone, his question clear in his stance. Would seeing these young ones change her plan? Neshoba touched the moccasins in her pouch, feeling the answers surface in her heart. The clan had feared her. Power, but that fear need not define her response to their need. The wolf pack had taught her that true strength lay in protecting others, not in seeking revenge. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. Soon the clan's hunters would be setting out, following the game trails that would take them dangerously close to the war party's path. Time was growing short. Neshoba looked to her pack, her true family, and saw in their eyes the same resolve that burned in her heart. They would protect this territory and these people, not because of past bonds, but because it was the right thing to do. The child's moccasins seemed to pulse with meaning against her side, reminding her that every journey circles back to its beginning in some way. She had left this place as an outcast, walking alone into exile. She returned now as something much more, with a family stronger than blood and a power deeper than fear. The gnarled walking stick appeared first from behind the rocks, its surface worn smooth by years of use and carved with symbols of healing and protection. Neshoba's heart clenched as she recognized it. Flying birds still lived. Her grandmother's scent reached her enhanced senses. Sage, sweetgrass, and the sharp tang of medicinal herbs mixed now with the fragrance of advanced age. "I knew you would return," Flying Bird's voice carried softly across the small clearing. "The spirits showed me in the smoke." She emerged fully into view, more bent than Neshoba remembered, but with eyes still sharp as desert stars. Shadow Singer, hidden in the brush beside Neshoba, remained perfectly still, but alert. "Grandmother," Neshoba whispered, the word feeling, strange on her tongue after so many moons of wolf speech. "How did you know where to find me?" Flying Bird's laugh was gentle as wind through canyon walls. "You think I cannot read the signs? Strange wolves near our hunting grounds, tracks that appear and vanish like spirit marks, and now these raiders approaching from the north. Who else could it be but my little wolf girl?" The old woman settled onto a sun-warmed boulder, her walking stick planted firmly beside her. "Come, let me see what the desert has made of you." There was no fear in her voice, no hint of the rejection that had driven Neshoba into exile. Neshoba stepped into the clearing, aware of Stoneheart and the rest of the pack watching from their hidden positions. Flying Bird's eyes widened slightly at the changes in her granddaughter, the fluid grace of her movement, the wild power evident in her stance, the wolf fang and obsidian knife that marked her transformation. "The old magic has awakened in you," Flying Bird observed, touching the symbols on her walking stick, "just as the ancient stories said it would. This is why they feared you, not because you were wrong, but because you were right." Shadow Singer chose that moment to emerge from hiding, moving to Neshoba's side with deliberate calm. Flying Bird showed no surprise, as if she had expected this too. "Your new family," she said simply, inclining her head to the wolf. "The spirits choose, better than we do sometimes." "There is danger coming," Neshoba said, her voice taking on some of the wolf's low tones. 15 warriors well armed, moving in 2 groups. They have destroyed other camps before this. Flying Bird's grip tightened on her walking stick. "Stone face," And the council will not listen to my warnings. They believe our summer grounds are secret, our warriors strong enough to defeat any threat. She looked up at Neshoba with urgent concern. But I have seen death in the smoke, blood on the morning dew. The clan is vulnerable. Many of our best warriors are away hunting buffalo on the eastern plains. The rest of the pack emerged now, arranging themselves around Neshoba in a display of unity that made Flying Bird's eyes glisten with understanding. "You came back to protect them," she said softly, "even after what they did. The pack has taught me that true strength lies in protecting others, even those who have caused harm," Neshoba replied, reaching down to touch Shadowsinger's fur. "But we need to know the clan's defenses, their weaknesses. We cannot help if we are fighting both. The raiders and our own people." Flying Bird's walking stick scraped against stone as she stood, her movements slow but purposeful. The night guards watched the eastern approaches, believing threats come only from that direction. The horse herds are kept in the lower meadow, poorly guarded. Stoneface has grown confident in our secret location. She paused, her expression troubled. But any attempt to warn them would be seen as dark magic, a sign that the spirits were right to cast you out. "Then we must find another way," Neshoba said, feeling the pack's agreement in their subtle movements. "A way that protects without revealing." The old woman's walking stick tapped thoughtfully against the ground. "There is a gathering tonight, a ceremony to bless the summer hunt. All the warriors will be at the sacred circle, leaving the camp's edges less guarded." She touched the carved symbols on her stick, then looked directly at Neshoba. If something were to happen during the ceremony, something that warned of danger without showing its source. Stoneheart moved forward, his massive form commanding attention even from Flying Bird. The Alpha's intent was clear. They would use the ceremony as cover to set their own plans in motion. Neshoba felt the rightness of it settling into her. Bones, the wolf and human parts of her nature, in perfect agreement. "We will protect them," she promised her grandmother, "even if they never know it was us." Flying Bird's walking stick bobbed in approval as she stepped forward to embrace her transformed granddaughter, the carved symbols seeming to glow with renewed purpose in the fading light. The war drum's deep pulse carried through the evening air, each beat a promise of violence to come. From their vantage point high in the red cliffs, Neshoba and the pack watched the enemy camp, reading the stories told by fire and shadow. The raiders had divided their forces as expected. 8 warriors in the main camp, 7 others hidden in a canyon to the west, waiting to strike from 2 directions. Stoneheart's hackles rose at each drumbeat, but he held his position, understanding the importance of patience. Through her enhanced senses, Neshoba could smell the war paint they were applying. Bare fat mixed with red ochre, the same color as the marks on their captured shield. Their weapons carried the metallic tang of stolen trade blades, mixed with traditional bone-tipped spears. "They are Ghost Clan," she whispered to Shadowsinger, recognizing the patterns of their preparation. "Raiders from the northern territories." The old wolf's ears twitched in acknowledgement, her keen eyes fixed on the warrior's movements. The Ghost Clan's reputation was well known. They struck at night, using the darkness and terror to their advantage. Swiftwater and Thunderpaw returned from their scouting circuit, their mental images flowing clearly into Neshoba's consciousness. The second group of warriors had already begun moving their horses into position, using the deep shadows of the canyon walls for cover. Their confidence made them careless. They hadn't noticed the wolf tracks that now surrounded their position, hadn't sensed the eyes watching their every move. The war drum's rhythm changed, becoming more complex. Neshoba closed her eyes, letting her wolf senses interpret its meaning. "They will attack at moonrise," she said to the pack, "when the ceremony fires are highest and the clan is distracted by their rituals." Nightrunner appeared silently beside them, carrying in his jaws a strip of leather from the raiders' camp, part of a horse's bridle. The scent it carried told its own story. These horses were desert-bred, stolen from other Tribes trained to run silent in the night, but horses, no matter how well trained, could never fully suppress their fear of wolves. Nashoba unrolled a piece of softened deerskin, using a charcoal stick to map out the terrain between the raiders and the clan's camp. The pack gathered around, their understanding of strategy equal to any human war council. They had learned to read her drawings just as she had learned to read their body language. "The main force will come through here," she indicated a narrow pass, expecting to find the horse herds unguarded. "The second group will wait until they hear the first attack, then strike from behind here." Her finger traced the planned pincer movement. "They mean to drive the clan into this box canyon, where escape will be impossible." Stoneheart's growl carried his assessment of the plan's effectiveness. It was a strategy that had probably worked many times before. Simple, direct, and deadly. But the raiders weren't counting on facing opponents who could see in the dark as well as they could, who could communicate without sound, who could move through the landscape like shadows themselves. The war drum's cadence grew more urgent as the sun sank toward the horizon. In the clan's camp below, Nashoba could see the ceremony fires being lit, could smell the sacred herbs being prepared. Flying Bird would be there, carrying her medicine stick, perhaps thinking of her granddaughter as she watched the flames dance. Shadow Singer pressed against Nashoba's leg, drawing her attention to movement in the raiders' camp. They were painting their horses now, using symbols meant to make them invisible to enemy spirits. The irony wasn't lost on Nashoba. These men who thought themselves ghost warriors would soon face real spirit powers, ones born from the union of wolf and human magic. The pack's strategy took shape as naturally as water flowing downhill. They would use the raiders' own plan against them, turning the pincer movement into a trap of their own. Night Runner and Swift Water would spook the horses at the crucial moment, while Thunderpaw and Stoneheart would drive the separated groups into killing grounds of the pack's choosing. Nashoba touched the obsidian knife at her hip, feeling the power humming through its crystalline surface. Her role would be to protect the clan's horse herds, preventing the raiders from escaping with their prize. Shadow Singer would stay with her, the old wolf's experience perfectly complementing Nashoba's transformed abilities. The war drum fell silent as the last light faded from the sky. In that silence, Nashoba could hear the ancient spirits stirring, the ones from the painted cave who had taught her to bridge the worlds of wolf and human. Tonight, those worlds would join in defense of people who would never know the true nature of their guardians. Stoneheart raised his head to scent the wind one final time, his massive form a darker shadow against the gathering dusk. The pack's readiness flowed through their bond like a shared heartbeat. The moon would rise soon, and with it would come the dance of life and death, played out according to rules the Ghost Clan raiders had never imagined existing. The spirit, mask fashioned from a wolf's skull and adorned with sacred feathers, rested cool against Nashoba's face as she crouched in the shadows near the clan's horse herd. She had crafted it during the last hours of daylight, combining Flying Bird's teachings with the wolf pack's magic. Through its eye holes, the world appeared transformed. Every shadow held meaning, every movement told a story. Shadow Singer's fur brushed against her leg, the old wolf's presence steady as stone. Above them, the rising moon painted the canyon walls in shades of silver and shadow. From the direction of the clan's summer camp came the rhythmic sounds of ceremony drums, punctuated by singing voices raised in prayer for a successful hunting season. If they only knew what kind of hunt was truly about to begin. Through the mask's enhanced vision, Nashoba watched Stoneheart lead the rest of the pack into their predetermined positions. Night Runner and Swift Water, the fastest of the pack, had already circled behind the raiders' western group. Thunderpaw waited in a narrow wash, ready to drive the enemy horses toward the trap they had prepared. The first sign of the attack came as a whisper of movement, ghost-painted warriors sliding through the darkness toward the horse herd. Nashoba counted 8 shapes, their bodies decorated with symbols meant to make them invisible to human eyes. But the spirit mask revealed them clearly, their intentions written in the way they carried their weapons, in the tension of their movements. Shadowsinger's ears twitched. She had caught the scent of the second group, moving into position on the canyon's far side. Everything was proceeding as Flying Bird had warned. The raiders thought they were springing a trap, unaware they were walking into one. The first warrior reached the edge of the horse herd, his hands reaching for a lead rope. Neshoba felt the power of the spirit mask surge through her blood, awakening something ancient and wild. She lifted her head and released a sound that was neither human cry nor wolf howl, but something that bridged both worlds, a spirit voice that carried all the power of the Painted Cave's magic. The effect was immediate. The horses, already nervous from the wolves' proximity, exploded into motion. The raiders' carefully planned silence shattered as the herd scattered, drums from the ceremony drowned out by the thunder of hooves and surprised shouts. Stoneheart's answering howl echoed from the cliffs, followed by the voices of the entire pack, a chorus that seemed to come from everywhere at once, multiplied by the canyon walls until it sounded like 50 wolves instead of 6. Neshoba saw the raiders' ghost-painted faces transform with fear as primal instincts awoke, telling them they faced something beyond their experience. Through the spirit mask's vision, Neshoba watched the raiders' formation dissolve. These were experienced warriors, but their tactics were built around fighting humans. Nothing in their training had prepared them for an enemy they couldn't see, for wolves that moved with human strategy, for a creature that combined the strengths of both worlds. Shadowsinger darted forward, her grey form nearly invisible in the moonlight. Her attack drove 3 warriors away from their horses, separating them from their weapons. Neshoba moved in concert with the old wolf, her obsidian knife flashing as she cut saddle straps and lead ropes. No killing, not yet. First, they would strip away the raiders' advantages piece by piece. The second group of warriors, hearing the chaos, abandoned their stealthy approach and rushed to aid their companions. But Night Runner and Swiftwater were ready. The 2 wolves burst from hiding, driving the raiders' horses into a panic. The ghost-painted mounts, already terrified by the wolf scent and spirit howls, threw their riders and fled into the darkness. Neshoba's voice rose again through the spirit mask, calling on powers that had slumbered since humans and wolves first parted ways. The moon seemed to pulse in response, its light gathering around her like a living thing. To the raiders' eyes, she must have appeared as something from their deepest nightmares, a shape that shifted between human and wolf, crowned with a death's head and moving with impossible speed. Stoneheart chose that moment to lead his final charge. The alpha wolf appeared like a spirit himself, massive and moonlight pale, leading Thunderpaw in an attack that scattered the remaining warriors. Their formation completely broken, the raiders began to retreat, all thoughts of raiding forgotten in their desperate need to escape this supernatural onslaught. Through the spirit mask, Neshoba watched their fear transform into blind panic. These men who had brought terror to so many others now knew terror themselves. Some dropped their weapons, fleeing into the night. Others huddled together, trying to form defensive circles that the wolves easily broke apart. Shadowsinger's thoughts flowed into Neshoba's mind through their pack bond. The enemy's spirit was broken, their confidence shattered. They had come expecting to find an easy target, and instead had found themselves hunted by powers they couldn't comprehend. The ceremony drums still sounded from the clan's camp, their rhythms now seeming to beat in time with the pulse of spirit magic that flowed through the mask. The clan remained unaware of the battle being fought in the darkness, of how close they had come to destruction, of the granddaughter they had cast out now standing as their unseen guardian. Neshoba touched the spirit mask, feeling the power of 2 worlds flowing through its carved surface. The night was not over. They still had to ensure the raiders fled far and fast, spreading tales that would discourage others from attempting what they had tried. But the immediate danger had passed, transformed by the union of wolf-pack tactics and ancient magic into something that would become legend. The eagle feather drifted down from nowhere, landing at Stoneface's feet as the old chief stood at the ceremony circle's edge. Like all hunters, he knew what it meant when the sky's greatest predator offered such a sign. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the firelight, where wolf howls and the sounds of battle had begun to penetrate even the ceremony's drums. Neshoba watched from the shadows as understanding dawned on her former chief's face. The spirit mask showed her his aura changing from ceremonial peace to warrior's alertness. Behind him, the clan's ceremony faltered as more people became aware that something extraordinary was happening in the night. Stoneheart's voice rose from the western cliffs, joined immediately by Thunderpaw's deeper howl from the east. The raiders who had fled their first attack were running straight into the pack's second trap. Shadowsinger pressed against Neshoba's leg, her thoughts clear. It was time to let the clan see enough to understand, but not so much that they would interfere. "Ghost warriors!" came a cry from the ceremony's edge. Young hunters who had been watching the perimeter now pointed at the fleeing raiders, their ghost paint glowing eerily in the moonlight. The clan's reaction was instant. Women gathered children, men reached for weapons, but Stoneface held up his hand for patience, his eyes fixed on that fallen eagle feather. Through the spirit mask, Neshoba could see flying birds standing near. The ceremony fire, her medicine stick raised slightly. The old woman's lips moved in what might have been a prayer or might have been a smile. She alone seemed unsurprised by the chaos unfolding around them. The raiders' leader, a tall man with a bear-claw necklace, tried to rally his scattered warriors. "Stand and fight," he shouted. "They are only wolves, only spirits." But even as he spoke, Night Runner and Swiftwater emerged from the darkness. Behind him, their synchronized movement a dance of deadly precision. The war chief spun, slashing with his knife, but the wolves were already gone, phantom shapes that struck and vanished. Neshoba felt the power of the spirit mask pulse stronger, calling her to complete the night's work. She stepped to the edge of firelight, deliberately letting her shadow fall where the clan could see it. The spirit mask transformed her silhouette into something ancient and powerful, neither human nor wolf, but a fusion of both that spoke to the deepest memories of all present. Stoneface's breath caught audibly. "The old stories," he whispered, "the legends of when wolves and humans hunted as one." Around him, the clan's elders murmured in recognition of something their own ceremonies had kept alive in song and story, though they had forgotten its true meaning. The battle's tide turned fully as Shadowsinger led the final charge. The old wolf had coordinated with Stoneheart, driving the remaining raiders into a tight group. Their horses were gone, their weapons scattered, their ghost paint useless against opponents who could see in the dark. Now they huddled together, backing toward the ceremony fires and the very people they had come to raid. Neshoba moved then, her transformed speed carrying her between the raiders and the clan. The spirit mask's power radiated from her like visible moonlight, and the obsidian knife in her hand sang with the voice of the ancient spirits. The raiders froze, caught between the approaching wolves and this apparition from their worst fears. "Look there!" a child's voice carried across the ceremony ground, the same girl who had nearly touched Neshoba's hiding place days before. She pointed at Shadowsinger, whose grey form now seemed to shimmer with spiritual power. "The wolves are protecting us!" The raiders' leader made one final, desperate attack, lunging toward what he perceived as the weakest point in the clan's gathering. But Stoneheart had anticipated this, years of huntcraft reading the man's intentions in his body's tension. The alpha wolf materialized from the shadows, his massive form knocking the war chief off his feet. The bear-claw necklace flew from the raider's neck, landing near the eagle feather at Stoneface's feet. What followed was not so much a battle as a ceremony of its own, a dance of wolves and shadow, of ancient power and modern fear. The raiders broke completely, fleeing into the desert night with terror lending speed to their feet. Behind them, they left weapons, ghost paint symbols, and stories that would be told around fires for generations. The clan stood in stunned silence as the wolf pack materialized one by one at the ceremony circle's edge. Stoneheart's presence commanded attention, his bearing every bit as regal as any human chief. Shadowsinger sat at Nashoba's side, her wise eyes reflecting the firelight. Even Flying Bird seemed to hold her breath as the moment balanced between past and present. Stoneface took one step forward, then another, approaching the fallen eagle feather. His hands, worn by years of leadership, trembled slightly as he lifted it. The feather seemed to catch the firelight and transform it, casting shadows that moved like running wolves across his face. "We had forgotten," the old chief said, his voice carrying to all present. "The stories told of guardians, of spirits that ran with wolves, of powers older than our fears." He looked directly at where Nashoba stood, though the spirit mask kept her true identity hidden. "We cast out what we did not understand, but still it returned to protect us. The clan's children, less burdened by adult fears, were the first to move closer to the wolves. Their small hands reached out in wonder, though they maintained a respectful distance. The pack sat calmly, displaying a dignity that even the most hardened warriors had to acknowledge. Nashoba felt the spirit mask's power begin to fade, its purpose fulfilled. This night had restored something ancient, bridged a gap that should never have been allowed to form. Stoneface raised the eagle feather to the sky in a gesture of respect, and in that moment she saw tears on the old chief's face, tears of remembrance, of gratitude, of recognition of how far the clan had strayed from the old ways. The medicine bundle lay open on Flying Bird's ceremonial blanket, its contents catching the first light of dawn. Sage bundles, prayer feathers, sacred stones, and now, most precious of all, a single wolf hair wrapped around the eagle feather from the night's battle. The old medicine woman's hands moved with practiced grace as she prepared the ceremony of gratitude, her weathered face serene with the knowledge of prophecy fulfilled. Nashoba watched from the edge of the gathering, the spirit mask now quiet. In her hands, the pack rested nearby, their presence no longer causing alarm among the clan members who came to lay offerings before Flying Bird's blanket. Shadowsinger's head rested on her paws, but her eyes remained alert, watching the ceremony unfold with ancient wisdom. "The spirits have taught us humility," Stoneface addressed the gathered clan, his voice carrying the weight of transformation. "We who thought we knew the boundaries between human and animal, between spirit and flesh, between safety and danger, we have been shown how little we truly understood." The morning air still carried the scent of ghost paint and fear from the raiders' flight, but it was overwhelmed now by the sweet smoke of ceremonial herbs. Children darted between adults, pointing excitedly at the wolves, while their parents watched with cautious wonder. The pack's defense of the clan had shattered generations of fear, opening the way for something older to return. Flying Bird lifted the medicine bundle, her voice taking on the rhythm of sacred stories. "In the beginning, when the world was young, wolves and humans hunted together. They shared not just the land but wisdom, each learning from the other. The wolves taught us to care for pack and territory, while we taught them the power of strategy and tool use." The clan's hunters nodded, recognition dawning in their eyes as they recalled how the wolf pack had used tactics no ordinary wolves could have devised. Stoneheart raised his massive head, meeting their gazes with dignified acknowledgement. "But fear crept in," Flying Bird continued, adding a pinch of sacred herbs to the smoking bundle. "Humans forgot the old bonds, began to see as enemies those who had been brothers. They drove away the spirit-touched ones who could speak to both worlds, believing they were protecting themselves. Instead, they only weakened the ancient bonds." Nashoba felt the weight of those words, remembering her own banishment. But there was no bitterness now. The pack had taught her that true strength lay in moving forward, in using power to protect rather than punish. Thunderpaw suddenly lifted his head, catching a scent on the wind. The clan tensed briefly, but the wolf's relaxed posture told them this was no threat. Through the lingering power of the spirit mask, Neshoba saw them, deer approaching the nearby meadow, drawn by some instinct to witness this rekindling of ancient bonds. "Look," a young hunter whispered, pointing to where the deer stood watching. "They show themselves without fear." Indeed, the prey animals seemed to understand that this was a moment of peace, of restoration. Flying Bird lifted the medicine bundle higher, her voice strengthening. "The spirits never abandoned us, even when we abandoned them. They waited patient as stone for us to remember. Last night, they reminded us through tooth and shadow, through wolf song and spirit power, that the old ways still live." Shadow. Singer rose gracefully and approached the medicine bundle, causing a ripple of murmurs through the gathering. The old wolf's presence beside Flying Bird created a picture straight from the clan's oldest stories. Medicine woman and wolf spirit, standing together in partnership rather than opposition. "We offer gratitude," Stoneface declared, laying down his chief's staff before the wolves, "for protection unasked, for wisdom unconsidered, for bonds we had forgotten." Other clan members followed his lead, bringing forward small gifts, meat, crafted items, symbols of respect. The pack accepted these offerings with dignity, but Neshoba knew they understood that the real gift was this moment itself, the restoration of trust between worlds. Through the spirit mask's lingering vision, she could see the ancient powers swirling around them all, weaving human and wolf spirits together once more. Flying Bird completed the medicine bundle's blessing, wrapping the wolf hair and eagle feather together with strands of sweetgrass. "Let these remain in our sacred places," she pronounced, "to remind us that protection comes in many forms, that wisdom speaks in many voices, and that the strongest bonds are those that bridge the greatest differences." The morning sun rose, fully over the canyon walls, painting everything in the colors of new beginning. Stoneheart stood, stretching his powerful form, and gave voice to a howl that spoke not of hunting or territory, but of unity restored. One by one, the clan members found themselves joining in, their voices blending with the wolves' song in a harmony that had not been heard in countless generations. The two spirit staff stood upright in the teaching circle, its surface carved, with spiraling wolves that seemed to move in the firelight. One side bore the marks of human tools, neat cuts and smooth planes. The other remained raw and natural, shaped by fang and claw. Neshoba had created it as a symbol of her role, a bridge between two worlds that need never have been separated. "Watch how they move," she instructed the small group of young hunters gathered around her. Shadow Singer demonstrated the wolf's hunting crouch, her movements deliberate and precise. The youngsters mimicked her stance, their bodies learning what their ancestors had once known instinctively. Stoneheart observed from nearby, his presence adding authority to the lesson. "The wolf does not waste motion," Neshoba explained, touching the carved side of the staff. "Each step has purpose, each breath carries meaning." She had removed the spirit mask for these teachings, letting them see her face, helping them understand that power could wear a human form and still honor wolf wisdom. Flying Bird sat at the circle's edge, her medicine stick resting alongside Neshoba's staff. The old woman's eyes shone with pride as she watched her granddaughter share knowledge that bridged generations of misunderstanding. Other clan members drifted in and out of the lessons, their initial fear transformed into cautious curiosity. "But how do you speak with them?" asked a young girl, the same one who had first recognized the wolves as protectors during the battle. Her question carried no fear, only eager wonder. Neshoba smiled, remembering her own first lessons with the pack. "We speak with more than words," she said, demonstrating how a shift in posture could convey respect or challenge. Shadow Singer moved in concert with her, their bodies telling the story better than words ever could. "The old songs mention this," Flying Bird added, her voice carrying the weight of tradition. "Before we forgot, our hunters ran with wolf companions, reading the same signs, sharing the same prey." She gestured to where Stoneheart lay. They were neither pets nor servants, but equals in the hunt. The alpha wolf's ears twitched at these words, his dignified bearing confirming this ancient truth. The young hunters watched in fascination as Neshoba approached him, their bodies mirroring the respectful posture she demonstrated. "The raiders taught us something too," Neshoba continued, running her hand along the untamed side of the staff. "They showed us what happens when we forget the old alliances, when we think we can stand alone against all threats." The children nodded, already incorporating the battle's lesson into their understanding of the world. Stone Face appeared at the teaching circle's edge, his presence no longer carrying the rigid authority of before. The raid had transformed him too, helping him understand that strength could come from unexpected sources. He watched as Thunderpaw demonstrated how wolves could guide hunters to better shooting positions, how their understanding of wind and terrain could improve a hunt's success. "We cannot return to exactly what was," Neshoba acknowledged, seeing the question in the chief's eyes. "Too much time has passed, too much has changed, but we can build something new that honors the old ways." She lifted the two-spirit staff, letting firelight play across both its worked and natural surfaces. The pack had begun teaching the clans and dogs, showing them how to be better guardians, how to warn of danger more effectively. In turn, the humans were learning to read the wolves' warnings, to understand their different howls and what each meant. Young hunters no longer raised weapons when wolves appeared near their hunting grounds, understanding now that they might be allies rather than competitors. "Each day brings new understanding," Flying Bird observed, watching as Swiftwater played, a gentle teaching game with the younger children, showing them how to move silently through brush. "The spirits are pleased to see the old bonds renewed." Neshoba touched the staff's smooth side, feeling the power that flowed through its carved symbols. This was her true purpose, she realized. Not just to protect the clan in times of danger, but to help them remember what they had forgotten. The wolf pack had taught her that wisdom, like hunting, was something to be shared. The sun began to set behind the mesas, painting the teaching circle in gold and shadow. Soon, the evening hunt would begin, and for the first time in generations, wolves and humans would move through the darkness as partners rather than enemies. The two-spirit staff would stand witness to this new beginning, its carved wolves running endless circles between the worlds of flesh and spirit, between what was lost and what could be again. The wolf clan totem rose tall against the morning sky, its weathered wood telling two stories at once. The old clan symbols remained on one side, speaking of ancient lineage and human traditions. But now wolf tracks spiraled up its length, carved deep and filled with turquoise, each print marking a lesson learned, a bridge built between past and present. "The scouts have spotted elk moving down from the high country," a young hunter reported, to the gathered hunting party. Behind him, Night Runner sat alertly, confirming the news with a soft whine. The wolf's presence at the planning meeting was no longer remarkable. In the months since the raid, such partnerships had become common. Neshoba studied the tracks drawn in the dirt before the totem, noting how the hunters had already begun. Thinking like wolves, planning to use the wind and terrain to their advantage. Stoneheart lay nearby, his experienced eyes watching the planning unfold. The alpha had taught them well, how to read the layers of scent on the wind, how to move in coordinated groups, how to think like the prey they hunted. The old way would have been to chase them into the Box Canyon, one of the veteran hunters mused, pointing to the traditional trap site. But the wolves have shown us better. He looked to Shadowsinger, who had risen and was indicating with her body language how the elk would likely move when pressured. The clan's hunting success had improved dramatically since adopting wolf wisdom. They took fewer risks, wasted less energy, and showed greater respect for the prey's spirit. The Wolf Clan totem recorded these successes in carved symbols that blended human and wolf understanding, a new kind of storytelling for a new kind of tribe. Flying Bird appeared from her medicine lodge, carrying sacred herbs to bless the hunt. But now, she was not alone in working spirit magic. The wolf pack had taught the clan about other kinds of medicine, how to read weather in the bird's flight, how to find healing plants by scent, how to sense danger in the sudden silence of small creatures. Remember what Shadow Singer taught us about the elk's defense circles, Nashoba advised, touching the totem's wolf tracks. They will protect their young in the center, strongest females facing outward. We must think like the pack, some to distract, others to guide, each hunter playing their part in the greater whole. The hunting party nodded, their faces showing none of the resistance such advice might have met in earlier times. The raid had proven the worth of wolf wisdom, and each successful hunt since had reinforced the lesson. Even the clan's children now played at being wolves as often as they played at being warriors. Stoneheart rose and stretched, signaling his readiness to begin. The hunting party would split into 3 groups, each working with 2 wolves, using strategies that had been refined over months of cooperation. The Wolf Clan totem had become more than just a symbol. It was a teaching tool, each carved track representing a lesson in this new way of living. The spirits are strong today, Flying Bird observed, burning her sacred herbs. The smoke curled around the totem's base, making the turquoise-filled tracks seem to glow. Both human and wolf ancestors walk with us. She had begun incorporating wolf calls into her healing ceremonies, understanding now that some ailments could only be cured by bridging the gap between worlds. The clan's territory had expanded, not through conquest, but through better stewardship. The wolf pack had taught them how to maintain healthy prey populations, how to guard boundaries without constant fighting, how to share hunting grounds with neighboring tribes in ways that benefited all. The totem recorded these changes too, peace treaties marked with both human handprints and wolf tracks. As the hunting party prepared to move out, Nashoba touched the obsidian knife at her hip, its power now working in harmony with the wolf. Magic that flowed through the clan's new identity. The spirit mask was rarely needed these days, but its teachings had become part of who they were as a people. Shadow Singer pressed against her leg, their years of partnership having forged a bond deeper than words. Together, they had helped create something unprecedented, not just humans who respected wolves or wolves who tolerated humans, but a true blending of both worlds' strengths. The Wolf Clan totem cast its shadow across the gathering space, its intertwined symbols of human and wolf heritage pointing the way forward. Young hunters headed out alongside experienced wolves, each learning from the other. Children sat with elders, listening to stories that now included the wisdom of both. Peoples, even the clan's songs had changed, incorporating wolf howls into their ancient rhythms. Stoneheart led the way into the morning hunt, his powerful form a living embodiment of the totem's meaning. The clan followed, moving like a pack, their movements bearing witness to how completely the old fears had been transformed into new. Strength, the harmony. Drum's deep voice rolled across the evening air, its rhythm matching the cadence of wolf song. Nashoba's hands moved across its surface, crafted from wood and stretched with elk hide that had been ceremonially prepared by both human and wolf teeth. Symbols burned into its rim told the story of transformation, how fear had turned to wisdom, exile to return, separation to unity. Around the ceremonial fire, the clan gathered for the new moon ceremony, but not as they had in times past. Wolfpack and human family sat together, their circles overlapping like ripples in a pond. Flying Bird led the prayers while Shadow Singer's howls provided harmony to the drum's voice. The old medicine woman had learned to weave wolf song into her ceremonies, understanding now that some spirits could only be reached through voices that bridged both worlds. "We honor the ancestors," Flying Bird intoned, scattering sacred herbs into the flames. Those who walked on 2 legs and those who ran on 4. Those who taught us to speak and those who taught us to listen. Stoneheart lifted his great head and gave voice to a howl that carried both tribute and teaching. The clan's children sat closest to the wolves, their young minds unburdened by old prejudices. They had grown up with this new way, learning to read wolf body language as easily as human words. Thunderpaw played gentle teaching games with them, showing how different positions could convey different meanings, while Swiftwater demonstrated the pack's warning signals. "The moon remembers," Neshoba spoke, her drumming taking on the rhythm of a heartbeat. "When we first shared fire, first shared meat, first learned to hunt as one family." The harmony drum's voice deepened, calling forth memories older than speech. Stoneface, who had once ordered Neshoba's exile, now sat in respectful attention as she led the ceremony. The old chief had learned humility from the wolves, seeing how their strength came not from dominance, but from unity. His own leadership had softened, becoming more like the wolf pack's fluid hierarchy. Young hunters presented the day's kill, a deer taken through the combined skills of human and wolf. The meat would be shared according to new customs that honored both traditions. The wolves would eat first, acknowledging their role in the hunt, then the elders, then the young. Nothing would be wasted, a lesson learned from watching how the pack treated prey with respect. The harmony drum spoke again, its voice now carrying the quick, sharp rhythms of a hunt. The clan's hunters moved in response, demonstrating the new hunting dance that incorporated wolf movements. Their bodies told the story of how the pack worked together, how each member played their role in the greater whole. "We are stronger together," Flying Bird declared, adding sacred bundles to the fire. "The spirits have shown us this truth through tooth and claw, through song and silence." Shadow Singer punctuated these words with a series of short howls, calling forth memories of the night when the raiders had been driven away by this united strength. The ceremony continued as the moon rose higher. Children were initiated into their first pack lessons, learning to move silently under Thunderpaw's patient guidance. Young adults received their wolf names, earned through demonstrations of pack wisdom rather than given at birth. Even the clan's dogs had found a new place, learning from their wild cousins how to be better guardians. Neshoba's hands moved across the harmony drum, drawing forth sounds that spoke of transformation. The drum itself was a symbol of this change. Its wood shaped by human tools, but marked by wolf claws. Its hide prepared through the efforts of both peoples. Its voice carrying songs that belonged to neither world alone, but to the space between. "The old fears are buried," she spoke, her words carried by the drum's rhythm, like tracks covered by new snow, like old wounds healed by time. The clan nodded in understanding, remembering how they had once shunned what they now embraced. The ceremony peaked as moonlight painted the gathering in silver. Human voices joined with wolf song in harmonies that hadn't been heard since the world was young. The harmony drum's voice held them all together, two-legged and four-legged, young and old, human wisdom and wolf instinct. As the ceremony drew to a close, Flying Bird blessed the gathered family with eagle feathers and wolf fur bound together. The clan's songs had been forever changed, incorporating howls and growls alongside ancient words. Their prayers now spoke to spirits of both worlds, and their dreams were richer for understanding both languages. The harmony drum's final voice faded into the night, but its echoes would continue in the new traditions being born, in the ceremonies that honored all paths to wisdom, in the unity that had been forged between what should never have been separated. Chi, moonstone pendant captured starlight as it swung from Neshoba's neck, its surface as luminous as the full moon above. She had crafted it from a stone found at the very spot where her exile had begun, working it with both human tools and wolf wisdom until it reflected both aspects of her nature. Now, one full cycle of seasons later, she stood again in that place, of transformation, but not alone. The entire clan had made the journey with her, walking alongside the wolf pack as naturally as if they had never been separated. Shadowsinger pressed close against her leg, the old wolf's presence a reminder of how complete the transformation had been. Stoneheart led his pack with dignified grace, while Flying Bird carried her medicine stick wrapped with both eagle feathers and wolf fur. "Here," Neshoba said, touching the ancient juniper tree that had witnessed her banishment. "This is where one life ended and another began." The moonstone pendant seemed to pulse with its own light, drawing together the threads of memory and change. Stoneface stepped forward, his face weathered by time and wisdom. "We gathered here in fear," he acknowledged, his voice carrying to all present. "We cast out what we did not understand, thinking we were protecting ourselves. Instead, we nearly lost everything that truly mattered." The clan's children, who had grown up with wolves as teachers, looked around the site with wondering eyes. To them, the story of a time when humans and wolves were enemies seemed as distant as tales of the first sunrise. Thunderpaw played gently with the youngest ones, demonstrating how completely trust had replaced fear. Flying Bird raised her medicine stick, calling forth the spirits of this place. "The old ones knew," she said, her voice blending with the evening wind. "They left us signs in cave paintings, in stories, in the very patterns of our ceremonies. We forgot how to read them, but the wisdom waited patiently for us to remember." The moonstone pendant caught the light of the rising moon, casting small rainbows across the gathering. Neshoba touched it, feeling the power that flowed through its polished surface. Like her, it had been transformed by both nature and intention, shaped by understanding drawn from two worlds. "The raiders' tales have spread," Stoneface continued, pride evident in his voice. "Other tribes speak of the wolf clan with respect, of how we are guarded by spirits that run on four legs, of how we have remembered what others forgot." Indeed, their reputation had grown. Other clans now sought their wisdom, eager to learn the old ways of partnership with the wolf peoples. Shadowsinger lifted her graying muzzle to the moon and began the song. One by one, the pack joined her, there, voices weaving together in complex harmony. The clan added their own voices, no longer separate, but part of the greater chorus. The moonstone pendant seemed to vibrate with the sound, its light growing stronger. "This place is no longer marked by loss," Neshoba declared, her voice carrying the authority of both worlds. "Let it stand instead as a reminder that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, that strength grows from unity rather than separation, that the oldest magics still run wild and free for those who remember how to look for them." Young hunters who had learned to run with wolves now stood tall beside their four-legged teachers. The clan's dogs, once fearful of their wild cousins, sat comfortably among the pack. Even the prey animals that watched from the shadows seemed to understand that a balance had been restored to the land. Flying Bird approached her granddaughter, tears of joy marking her aged face. "You were never lost," she said softly, touching the moonstone pendant. "You were finding your way back to something we had all forgotten." The old woman's medicine stick touched the ground where Neshoba had begun her exile, and desert flowers bloomed instantly in its wake. The moon reached its zenith, bathing the gathering in silver light. Stoneheart approached Neshoba, his powerful form radiating the dignity of his position. The alpha wolf touched his nose to the moonstone pendant, acknowledging how completely the bridge between their worlds had been rebuilt. "We are the wolf clan now," Stoneface pronounced, speaking not just to those gathered, but to the spirits of past and future. "Not because we control wolves or because wolves control us, but because we have remembered how to run together, hunt together, live together as the old ones did." The moonstone pendant flared one final time, its light merging with the moon above. In that moment, Neshoba felt the presence of all who had brought this transformation to pass. The spirit wolves from the painted cave, the ancestors who had first shared fire with wolves, even the frightened girl she had once been, taking her first steps into exile. The night wind carried their song across the desert. Wolf voices and human voices joined as one, telling a story of fear transformed to wisdom, of separation healed by understanding, of how the oldest magics could still show the way home.